Mr. Uday Dandavate is a design activist and ethnographer of social imagination. Mr. Dandavate is also CEO of Sonic Rim, a San Francisco based design research company specializing in co creation. He has traveled extensively around the world, studying and connecting with all kinds of people and cultures, and watching and participating as they change over time. In his professional capacity, as well as through blogging, teaching, speaking, and facilitating, Mr. Uday Danvate provokes fresh perspectives that help to humanize technologies and democratize design. During the pandemic, Mr. Danvate published two books of poems: A Window for a Home Without Walls, Life Imagination Design, and Finding Your Bebo. He is also an adjunct professor at the Integrated Innovation Institute of the Carnegie Mellon University. So, with that, may I now request Mr. Uday Dandavate for the keynote address?
Thank you very much, Rucha. So I'm sure when Rucha was explaining my profile, you had many questions because that's not the common language you hear when designers present their capabilities or their experience or their competencies. And the reason why my journey and therefore my bio looks different from a traditional design graduate or a practitioner. So one reason why it looks different is because of my journey, which has taken me from June 25, 1975, my first day at NID, to where I stand today. So I'm going to tell you the story of my journey because I do know there are many parents on this call and they're anxious of where we are today, what the prospects for their children are. I'm sure children, all of you students are anxious about the profession you've chosen, what kind of jobs you're going to get, and what kind of future is awaiting you, especially because we are in the middle of a pandemic, a global pandemic where we've been through real hardships. Economies have collapsed, businesses have collapsed. So, what does investment in design mean? What kind of jobs are we going to get? What kind of value are we going to create in the marketplace, in the society? How do we present ourselves when everybody is competing for jobs from an economy that is not producing as much uh, revenue? All of these questions, I'm sure parents are thinking about, you are thinking about, and therefore I kind of feel that I'm going to take a different approach to my presentation. As much as ideology, philosophy, and kind of idealism has driven my entire career, I also realized that today, as a business owner, I hold a responsibility for supporting people who depend on me for jobs at a time when people are fast losing jobs around me. I work in a building where 500 people used to work, not in my company, but in that building. And today, no more than 10 people come there. I live on a street which is the creativity hub of San Francisco, on a street where traffic jams were common. Today, I hardly see 5 or 10 cars driving past me when I stand by the side of the street. I watch what's going on in India. All these hardships, what do they mean? The present seems to look very bleak. So, what's waiting for us? And that's where I want to share hope, because I've been able to survive through these times. I've been able to retain what I learned in design school and evolve it into a practice that keeps me relevant through good times and bad times. And I can say from all these 46 years of experience, this is the worst time I've experienced in these 46 years. And I can also say from my experience that this is the best time I've experienced for telling the story of why my services are needed by my clients. So this, I just wanted to set up this context for you, because I'm sure all of you and your parents want to see you prosper into professionals uh, who produce value for the marketplace, for the society, and also create prosperity for yourself. So what does all that mean in terms of basic design talents and the role of design in shaping the future at a time when the present looks bleak? That's the background in which I want to talk. I remember the day I joined NID on 25th June 1975. It was a difficult time for India. It was literally the day state of emergency was declared in India. Um, Also, it was my birthday. And so kind of we were in an entirely new situation. We walked into the studios of Foundation program. In here, there was a man, Mohan Bhandari, stood there. He had all his hair, hey, it looked like mine, cleaned up. He stood before us, and the first sentence he said after welcoming us was, "Well, I'm going to be the head of foundation for you for the next 1 year. I'll be coordinating a lot of your activities. And one thing you're going to do this year is to unlearn everything you've learned till now and embrace your childlike curiosity. You're going to regain the things you were born with, and you're going to build yourself from there. You're going to build your skills, you're going to build your thinking power, you're going to build your capacities by unlearning what you learned in high school and relearning ways of looking at the world with fresh eyes, with curious eyes, with creative eyes and hands." I would never forget that, because that message has stayed with me. It has defined the shape of how I have practiced design. Let me explain. So that comes down to what is design? What are you going to make a career out of? It is not the trade that you learn. It's not some of the skills that you learn. It's not just what you can do with your hands, but it's more about what do you create in the society? Why do you create it? Constantly questioning that and constantly looking for ways to come out of the present with the tools that you have, the thinking tools that you have, the creative tools that you have, so that people can live a better life. Observing, sensing the challenges people face, simple problems they face, something as simple as what's the height of a step people have to climb, who climbs it, and why it needs to be adjusted. Does that person have arthritis? Does that person have to run? All of those questions can have an impact on the height of a step. On the other hand, you could be handling questions such as, how do I help survive a community of artisans whose artifacts are losing market? Their livelihood is in question. How do I create a sustainable living option for such a community of artisans? So moving from something as simple as the height of a step to survival of a community, you could be handling any of those questions and problems, and start with where you started in your life: an open mind, a curious mind, a capacity to observe, capacity to understand, a capacity to empathize, and then process all that information to either individually on your own or collectively with other people, to constantly look for options to solve the problem at hand and to explore for new ways of making life better for whomever you are responsible for. So, what does design mean to me? Over all these years, I have changed my practice. When I graduated from NID as a product designer, I started building products, physical products, consumer products, television sets, transistor radios, domestic appliances. My job was in different companies and later in my design studio to create products that one of my employers, that time it was Bajaj Electricals, their general manager used to say the best way to design a product or create a product for Indian market is to make it sasta, badhiya or tikau. That was his philosophy. So what does badhiya mean? I think sasta and tikau we all understand. But what does badhiya mean? I think badhiya has an amazing expanse of possibilities. It's something that brings delight into your heart. It's something that brings delight into your home, into your community, and into the society. It triggers imagination. It creates a spark, something that's rooted in local culture, local sensitivities, local traditions. And when you create that connection, you create something what the general manager of Bajaj used to call Sasta Badhiya and Tikau, the Badhiya part of it. So how do you create a Badhiya experience? I think that's something where designers' capacity to think at different scales comes into play. We have to recognize that we have one unique power that nobody else in the whole value chain has. We have the capacity to absorb information, all of the information that affects creation of what we are going to design, and appropriately distribute our creative way of thinking, focus and diffuse our thinking alternately to create value at different scales. At a scale where you use available technology, craftsmanship to create something that's beautiful, create something that's useful, create something that's usable, whether it's an artisanal product created in Muradabad or it's an autonomous car built in the factories of Tesla. You are grappling with the same kind of challenges. How do you create an imagination of a life living with the artifacts that you're going to design? And why are you taking an approach to design? Is it serving a purpose in the world? Who is it serving for? What is it going to deliver? These are some of the questions that designers are able to address, discuss, and create a conversation about, challenge people's assumptions, and help create a common understanding of what's possible, as a design, not of an artifact, but design of a life with that artifact. That takes me to another interpretation of design that I have evolved over a period of time. Design neither begins nor ends with designers. You look at anything in your home, for a moment, look around you, in your parents, in your grandparents' homes. Think about some of the products that have survived generations and you would never throw away. It could be something as simple as a wallet, it could be a chair, it could be anything, a pot. There are things in our homes that we would not, if we would carry forward for generations. There are things that you may not use, but you may still hold on to because there are memories tied to it. There are stories tied to it. There are things that may not be ergonomic, may not be efficient, but you would still not be willing to give up because there is meaning tied to it. There are all of these things that contribute to why we hold on to certain artifacts, images in our home. The pictures that we have on the walls tell another story. If you look around the pictures in your grandparents' homes, in your parents' homes, your modern aesthetic may not conform to it, may not find appealing to it. Maybe sometimes some of you may have argued with somebody saying, this really looks ugly, or this is not really in sync with the design style I want to bring into my home or in my workplace. But then there is a dialogue, there's a discussion, there's argument, and then you settle on what goes up on the walls. These conversations happen in the homes. And I've understood that design of a home, design of a life involves conversations between people about what's meaningful to them and why. And then there's a negotiation about what stays and what goes out. And in that process, no one person gets to impose one view of the environment we want to live with. We all co-create a place in which we live. That is design. And that design lives in people's minds, not in designer studios. That design lives in people's imagination. That lives in histories, that lives in traditions, that lives in new practices that are evolving, new values that are evolving. There are traditions that elders bring into play that we must respect, understand, and understand why they exist. But at the same time, there are aspirations that younger generation brings home when they wander around the world, feel the new breezes of change, new ideas, new expressions, and they come back and want to be like what they've seen outside. So all of these things that are happening in people's minds, in people's lives, are shaping what I call social imagination. You may not see one homogeneous social imagination. There isn't one imagination of what India is or what it could be. There isn't one imagination of what the world is or what it could be. There isn't one imagination of how we ought to live. So there are so many perspectives, there is so many imaginations. And the idea for designers is we are the only ones who can facilitate the conversation through which emerges the imagination of what's possible through the process of collaboration, through the process of understanding each other, accommodating each other, and creating something where each of us finds a corner of comfort, a corner of meaning, rather than a space, a product, or a culture, or an environment which is imposed by an idealistic view of one person in the home or in the community or in the society. That's where design comes into play. Our ability, our mental resilience, our capacity to absorb, observe, and play with these different considerations that people in different places view. Because I learned to reclaim my childlike curiosity that Mohan Bhandari talked about on the first day at design school, I always am able to step away and see with wonder what's going on here. I wonder, why are people so passionate about something when I don't see what they see? Why are two people fighting over something where each of them holds a perspective and not a truth? And that's where I play the role as a designer of getting people to see the side that they are not seeing and creating a space in which they can all coexist. And this may sound like a philosophy, but trust me, I've managed to keep my business alive through 3 different recessions because my clients have learned that when they get bogged down with the problem and when they get focused on a problem, they lose track of the wider realities, the environment that may have the solution to their problem. But when they're so sharp focused on that problem, they lose track of things that is influencing that problem, what has caused that problem. They have people who are passionate about the beliefs they have held for generations or for years. They they come to the table as experts, and they have lost track of their intuition and their capacity to observe the situation as it appears to be, as it is, with all its tensions, its contradictions, and its possibilities. So that's where designer comes into play as a person who can be the thread, who can weave all these uh, beads together and create a necklace from it, create an experience from it. And I think designers are catalysts who will participate in social imagination through a dialogue, through a conversation, shape the dialogue, shape the narrative, through that, shape the imagination in a given community, which could be a community of artisans, could be a community within a company producing high-tech products, or it could be a larger society that has to take a position on the state of technology they want to allow into their economy. At any scale, designers can participate in bringing understanding of the reality, understanding of the possibilities, and through that produce stimuli. The design artifacts that you create are stimuli for conversations, are stimuli for experimentation. They are not the final solution for anything. Design studios are laboratories for possibilities. So you serve as people who go out, shape imagination, shape conversations, come back, tinker with materials, produce artifacts, produce scaffolds in which you invite other people to build solutions. You don't just go away in a design studio and build solutions. You go out in the real world, people who have a stake in the ultimate design of life, not design of artifact, that must have a say in what artifacts will bring value, meaning, and a sense of delight to them. And then through that conversation, create a product that will evolve over time. Don't create a product as a final solution, but create a product that has the capacity to absorb the tensions of various stakeholders, create characteristics in it that allows it to evolve, grow, and change into something else as people take it home, people live with it. So when you create a design that is malleable to people's intentions, their realities of how they live with it, and then it evolves into something else, is likely to survive beyond design studios and manufacturing units. So the true design is one which participates in social processes, social conversations, evolving culture, evolving technologies, yet is focused on basic human aspirations for why and how people want to live the way they want to live. So you are not just artisans. You are not experts in technologies because all of these change. Everything changes. The only thing that doesn't change is there are higher principles of how we live together, how we live together in harmony with nature, how we live together through understanding of each other, and how we live by supporting each other. What the pandemic has taught us is that there are issues that have surfaced during the pandemic that tell us that we have created some problems such as pollution because we didn't care for each other. We've created some problems such as deforestation because we didn't care for the impact of our greed. We've created problems such as garbage dumps because we didn't care for our choices. So there are different scales at which we talk, but we don't act. There are different scales at which we hold beliefs, but we are not open to learning. And therefore, designers with their childlike curiosity, compassion, and creativity can hold a responsibility for bringing understanding, collaboration, and creativity in the society, and not just in their own minds, not just in their own hands, but in the place, in the communities that you live with. Today, I have so many projects where companies hire my teams to go out in the real world and understand how people live. Who are they? What's important to them? How are their beliefs different from our own? I have this amazing technology. It can do these things according to engineers. But do people really need it? If people really need it, why do people need it? I have certain people in my management who believe that this is how people should live. This is how, if people live, I will make more profit. This is how, if I design something, I will be able to collect data from people and sell that to make money. There are all of these questions that come from narrow lens that people have, whether it's a technology person or whether there is a business person looking about the bottom line, whether it's an engineer or a traditional designer who just wants to make things beautiful. But I think one thing that we as people trained in design can do is to constantly keep expanding our observation power, expanding our understanding of life, refining our understanding of life, taking a position, go on the mountaintop and look down on the world and see what are the consequences of our actions, what are the consequences of our design decisions, what are the consequences of social changes, what are the consequences of political changes, how does it affect the last person in the ladder, because we must care for everyone. If we don't care for everyone, it has consequences. It has consequences for our health. It has consequences for our mental health. It has consequences in terms of crime. It has consequences in terms of harmony within a community. So all of these questions can be addressed by designers making simple decisions: which technologies to use, who makes them, how to support them. What is more important when you're grappling with multiple ideas, whether to use this technology or to where to put your investment in? And all of these decisions you may think are business decisions to be made by business leadership, but I have learned over the period of time, leadership is often blinded like a horse with the blinders on a single purpose of satisfying investors. We, on the other hand, don't have blinders. We can think and we can see and we can feel in 360 degrees. And I think from that place we enjoy, with that beautiful mind of ours that has not been tainted by business realities, social biases, religious biases, technological biases. We can just think like a child. We can think beyond what anybody else in an organization can think, because we are open, because we care, because we can see what's obvious, which others can't see. And maintaining that freshness of perspective, maintaining that empathy and care for people will make you a unique person, no matter whether you are in a bad economy or a good economy. You will always be able to demonstrate to your clients, to your investors, to the community, where you must create a narrative of why design matters. You can tell all of them that you are the one who is the creator of dreams, who is the creator of hope, and you are a creator of possibilities with the well being of everyone involved at heart. So I believe this, when you take this approach, you will never be outdated. Recession will not affect you. In fact, you will thrive when everybody loses hope, because you will bring hope. You will thrive when technology becomes redundant or obsolete, because you will have multiple ways of creating value and you would not be tied to single technology. You will have a place and a job, because when you hit the wall, you will know how to climb the wall. You will know how to look beyond the wall and not get stuck there when you hit the wall. So I think as designers, you've chosen a good path. You have chosen a purposeful path, even in terms of ethics of what we ought to produce, ethics of how we make small design decisions. A lot of industries don't care. They don't look at consequences. They look at immediate objectives of the technology, of the company, of the organization that they have in mind. You have the capacity of thinking about consequences. You are the savior of humanity in people, humanity in the society, and you are capable of thinking about ecology. These are the two things that you can create with playfulness, with the spirit of playfulness, with the spirit of aesthetic, with the spirit of harmony. You are like a musician. You are like a poet who speaks, who creates with a joyful heart, who has in mind only one purpose. When you create something for your audience, the only thing you have in mind is to create a connection with the audience, to delight the audience with a joyful experience. And that joyful experience could be not always a happy experience. It could be just a very solemn understanding of the seriousness of the situation. If you're designing a patient room in a hospital, you're not creating a fun experience. But it could be a fun experience if you're designing a playhouse. So there are these different human emotions that you could be designing for, while keeping in mind how other people surrounding that experience, what their life is like, what consequences you have with your actions for the life of people who are surrounding them. When you're designing for a patient, you're designing for the nurses, you're designing for the patient's families, you're designing for an entire infrastructure in the hospital that must support um, the families that come into the hospital or go outside the hospital. So there's a whole gamut of experiences and ecosystem of experience that exist in the world, and you as designers are capable of understanding that ecosystem. So the ecosystems based thinking is another, a systems based thinking is something else that you bring into table. So these are some of the things that make you resilient to change. Rather, you can thrive amidst change. You can thrive amidst despair. You can thrive amidst anger. You can thrive amidst argumentation. You can thrive amidst collapse of an economy. You can thrive in the midst of any problem that humanity may face, because you're empathic, you're curious, and you're always thinking of possibilities. So I think at this stage, I would love to invite questions, because I know parents are sitting here, students are sitting here, professors are sitting here, very wise people are sitting here. And so go ahead and ask me any questions. And through my answers, I could continue this dialogue.
That you said that the pandemic was the best and the worst time for you. So I wanted to know more about how you thrived through the recession, like you said, as a designer.
Okay, so uh, you would be surprised that I more and more realize that I'm not in the business of creating ideas or creating products, but of building long term relationships where people rely on you for looking at a clarity of what's possible, what they don't see, with a mind of recognizing opportunities for creative solutions. So pandemic was the time when my clients had the most severe kind of a trauma. You never knew when it was going to end. Is the world coming to an end? Is the economy coming to an end? Their products are not selling. They don't know how long they can hold on to their employees. They don't know when they're going to like turn on the machines. And they were really in a bad shape. Should they stop designing? Should they stop thinking about the future? Is the future is going to be a continuation of the past, or is it going to be different? How are people's thinking changing? Because each one of them was changing. When they went home and turned on Zoom and didn't have to drive anywhere, didn't have to walk anywhere, they could uh, sit in their pajamas and conduct highest level conversations, strategic conversations with people with whom they talked in three-piece suits in the past. All of these things had a very confusing impact on them. And they continue to feel that the relationship that they have built with us, they suddenly began to articulate to us that, oh my God, we just need a conversation. And we know that these conversations reveal us how others are feeling, how others are thinking, what kind of a life they want to live, what kind of a future we are going to be faced with, and what's going to be our roles. How do we prepare for the future that's emerging? Trust me, my business, my revenue was at 25% of what it used to be, but there were a lot of people who had zero revenues, a lot of businesses that shut down. I was able to support people in a spirit of sharing in my company we could pay our bills. We just had to recognize that we didn't need all the money we needed. We didn't need all the goods that we needed. When I stood in front of my closet with shoes and clothes and everything, I began to think, last 15 months, I've not touched this. I've not touched my electric iron. And then I began to wonder, what kind of a life was I chasing? What kind of a life do I want to live in the future? What am I running for? And suddenly all of these conversations became relevant even in my client companies, because they wanted to know, if people wanted to live a different life with different priorities, they need to be prepared for. And therefore, they continued to put money in this piggy bank that we became. We became a piggy bank of ideas in which, one drop at a time, one coin at a time, we were accumulating the currency that would take them to the future. So that was the good and the bad. The bad was we didn't make as much money. The good was we lived, we survived happy.
There's a question from Divya Lavti. As a designer, have you ever felt that why I am in this field and I'm not capable of doing this thing, like everyone went out of ideas many times? So how you overcome from that feeling?
Question is, yes, I have felt that many times in the past. I have felt I was not good enough. I have felt other people are better than I am. I have felt I don't have the skills that the market requires. I don't create the style that the market requires as a designer. I have felt outdated. I have felt weaker. But then I realized, every time you become outdated in one level, you accumulate knowledge, you accumulate wisdom, you accumulate a view of life. That is what matters. So you begin to learn more, you begin to gain knowledge, you begin to participate in the creation of design, not at a level of what artisan I can create, uh, but it's more about how can I participate in the community that produces the design. And trust me, no one person produces a design, even if it is one single artisan creating one single artifact. It is a whole community life that supports creation and survival of that artifact. And for us and for me to develop more and more understanding and humility of how that gets created, has created in me greater confidence of my relevance by accumulating wisdom. So, yes, there has always been this struggle between my ego to be a designer with unique talents, differentiated outputs, and success and glory, and being a hero. But more as I grew in age, knowledge, wisdom, and humility, I realized all of those values that I had in the early part of my design career were worth nothing.
Next question is from Dharmendra Kumar Patel.
Actually, I wanted to ask that, as Sir said, that we can connect design and our point of view together to make someone understand. So, how can we do that?
One of the things I do very frequently is take people to places where design is used. A lot of times, most decision makers are so comfortable in their air conditioned offices that they don't even care to see how the people who use their products live, where their products sit, what impact it has even on people who produce it. And a lot of times, just taking them, not even telling them anything, taking them to these different places where this product has to live through, creates that greater understanding and transforms people's thinking. And so that's one thing we do. Very recently, I did a project for you may have heard of a Mustang. It was made in 1964, It's featured in many movies. It makes a loud rumbling sound, and people feel like a macho movie hero rumbling through the streets. There are many dreams people have around the world of owning a Mustang, working with it, tinkering it in their garage. All of these images and ethos are tied to that brand. There's been a company and the brand and the product that has survived for so many years. Can you tell us what do we do? Do we change the design? How much? Because it's a legacy product. So there are some design beliefs that are tied to this. He said, okay, let's go out and talk to people who are younger generation, who are going to be the carriers of your product into the future. Let's see how they live, what they do, what they use, what's important to them, what is their imagination, what are their values, what are their aspirations. So we traveled around the world with a group of clients from the middle management. And we did all kinds of things that younger generation did. We targeted 18 to 25-year-olds and we hung out with them, all age groups, everything. And we got them involved in workshops where they would build their lifestyle of the future. They would build their transportation of the future. And they would, of course, at the end, build their vehicle of the future. And through that conversation emerged some of the values that the younger generation believes in, some of the choices that they make. And that's where the company, that these representatives of company, every time we came back from a country, we would have a workshop where we discuss, so what did we learn about the younger generation? What does it mean for your brand, for your company, for what you mean to them, what the car means to them, what the movies mean, in which your car features means to them, what do they see themselves as in that car, and so on. And all of these questions led to making some mental shifts in that company. They decided to make a big change. There's a whole roadmap to how that product and the brand is going to evolve. And we were able to make their focus change to the extent that one of the questions we asked is, what is your brand going to mean to people who don't ever want to own a car? And some of these difficult questions we asked. So this is one kind in an entirely different technology. Another side, we talked to a company that served poor people with telephone service, Wi-Fi service. And the top management had never ever gone into the homes of these people. They were creating new innovative services for the community that they've never knew how they live. So we took them through an ethnographic survey of how people live. We got them closer to the life and the daily routines and the aspirations of that people. And we created a whole strategy for what kind of service design solutions are possible for them. Their aspiration was we would tell them how to design their stores and make their products beautiful to appeal to these people with unique aesthetic senses. And we told them, no, you don't want to upgrade. They wanted to upgrade them. We said, no, you need to come to their realities and think like them and create what they need, rather than think you have the responsibility to elevate them to your elite status. They didn't like us. They didn't like our recommendations, and they didn't move forward with our recommendations. 3 years later, a bigger company acquired them because they were serving a market that big company didn't have appeal for. And they thought they will acquire that company and have access to a new segment of the society that has entirely different needs and relationships with the brands and products that they purchase. And they created an entirely new product line. So these are the kind of things that are examples.
Yes, sir, I don't mean it as flattery. I mean, I genuinely mean it, but I envy your personality and philosophy. I don't mean it as flattery.
Thank you. Let me ask you a question. Forgetting it is being my personality, what appeals to you and why?
Well, Well, this, I mean, it's a big, I mean, I'm a teenager, so I mean, it's a big word. Uh, but this society, I feel, is degrading. I mean, the more the society, the more we're advancing, the more it's advancing, the more the values are degrading, corroding, and so this society has a dearth of few good souls, such as yourself, Sangeeta ma'am. I mean, I don't mean it. I mean, sir, you are not related to me. I mean, so I mean that's.
I hear you, and I would only thing say is that yes, the society is degrading because we allow it to degrade. I think we need to participate in the society in ways that even if we feel we are at a losing end, we should keep voicing and creating conversations that creates hope. And as a designer, one reason why I decided to, or rather, I published 2 books of poetry in last 1 year is because I realized creative writing and poetry and filmmaking and many creative things. My wife does dance. Creative activities, I think, touch the soul and touch the imagination in a more harmonious way. And I think we need more of this kind of a creative expression that evokes people's goodness in them and not get them bogged down with greed and hatred and anger and all of those things. We just need to learn to care for each other and do it playfully in a fun way. You can have a lot of fun without necessarily buying and owning a lot of stuff.
I mean, that's the general meaning of success. Yeah. Yes, sir. I understand. I mean, thank you, sir. I mean it.
You're welcome. Any other comments, questions?
So, Vani Agarwal, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, thank you so much for having us and coming here, first of all. And I wanted to ask you, you've been working with a lot of big brands and big companies with a lot of people who aren't exactly designers and have been taught the same things that we're going to be taught or we're going to learn over the course of the next few years. So what would you say is the biggest challenge when talking to people who don't share your same concepts and same mindset?
In one word, ego.
Well, like maybe how do you overcome those challenges? I mean, like it must be a big thing to actually convince someone that your idea might be better than their ego and their ideas.
Bring them to open their eyes and see the truth and see that their truth is not somebody else's truth, that there is no one truth, but there are only perspectives, and how to work with multiple perspectives. Even with eyes open, people don't see what you show. They have to see it inside their heads. That's why now I write poetry. I create conversations. I've stopped building anything.
Sir, if you could tell another story of another situation.
Let me think of which one. Okay. So many years ago, Motorola came to, this is like way before Nokia was the dominant phone maker in India. So that's like probably before any one of you was born. Came to us and said, hey, we want to see, India is a big market. We want to see what kind of a business strategy to have in India. So we took their 24 middle-level executives on what we called an in-field ideation experience. So we took them to villages, to Mofussil towns, and to cities of India. And there we engaged in conversations, in observations, in sensory experiences of India, had honest conversations with people. We even sat in panchayats and talked to people. And every day we would come back and start the day with what we learned from the previous day. And we did that for 2 weeks. Then we came back, we all organized what we learned, our insights on post-it notes. We had hundreds of post-it notes. We started organizing them. Then we created uh, categories of our observations. We created 3 levels of thinking. What's the life in India and what it could be through the eyes of people in India, not through their eyes. What are the capacities of India? And number 3, what are the opportunities for the company? So we organized those insights in those ways. And it was kind of the foundation of their understanding of how to cater to Indian market. So that was another thing where we were actually shaping the imagination of an organization about the culture and behaviors and values and traditions of a place that most of them had no connection to. We had projects about education. We did a project for Microsoft where they wanted to learn in K through 12, kindergarten through 12th grade, how do students, teachers, school administrators, and parents, what kind of communication happens between them? Where are the bottlenecks? Where are the tensions? And how to create a more collaborative, constructive communication between these stakeholders in K through 12 education. So it is another kind of project that had design implications for a technology company. So they were trying to create a platform. Another project was, there's a company called Firefox. You may have heard Mozilla browsers. They are unique, unlike Internet Explorer or Chrome, where these guys have communities of developers who are not owned by Firefox. And they build plugins for the browser. And they get ideas and then they build it. So they wanted us to see how to strengthen their developer market. And through that, create a more strengthened set of practices for making the Firefox browser experience more inclusive. So we traveled to emerging countries like Thailand, Indonesia, and we met with these young, like 15 to 21-year-old kids who were either students or had like their first job, and in their part-time, they were doing software development. We talked to them about what motivates them, what inspires them, what kind of projects they work on, and then built a whole framework for Mozilla to how to engage these communities of people in purposeful, innovative practices so that they continue to bring problems from their communities to bear on the practice of developing software that's open source and crowdsourced. One day, one of the food companies asked us to do workshops with people who are ecologically minded to understand what are the flavors that they consider aligned with their values and how to create a palette of foods that are in sync with the values of ecologically conscious people. That's like entirely different domain of design.
Interested to know what were the flavors the environmentally conscious people.
So it was more of a regenerative exercise where you get people to articulate an experience in their own way, and like an artist, the chef interprets their ideas and turns it into a flavor.
Uday, in our conversation, you had mentioned that you were quite impressed with the Nirma industry, that they gave a lot of global multinationals a run for their money.
Mhm.
Would you expand on that and the thought that the proposition from that emerges?
So I think I was going to keep that as my last comment, but I'm glad that you brought it up. I think Nirma is a story of the importance of homegrown sensitivities and its impact on how people embrace the right mindset, right attitude, right cultural expression, the right language. And I think Nirma understood that. So everything that was designed in its strategy was very homegrown. The same thing was with, if you say at one time when Thumbs Up came up, Coke could not compete with Thumbs Up. You know why? Because it kind of gained recognition within the marketplace that this is a homegrown product, homegrown brand that emerged after Coke and Pepsi were banned from India. And it was such a strong product that for the first time in the history of Coke, Coke decided to acquire a brand, and they did some real nasty things to acquire it. And then they did not kill it. Normally, big companies, sometimes they acquire their competition to kill it so that they can prevail. They realize that their business strategy to maintain a standardized flavor did not work in India. They had to keep the flavor of Thumbs Up going. And so that was another thing which shows Nirma, Thumbs Up. These are some of the stories of how you need to connect at a very grassroots level, at a very native sensitivities level with the humanity. Recognize that we are local as much as we have fascination for global. And I think in my view, in the future belongs to local, where the businesses can create business models that integrates their global interests with local value creation is for them to decide. As a designer, I always champion, if you want to make a deep connection, think about the story of Nirma, think about the story of Thumbs Up. And that's when you will create much deeper and long-lasting relationship with the local culture.